Okay, great. So we're now recording, and also just to let you know that you can also use the chat function if you want to ask any questions, and you feel free to ask and raise your hand anytime that you want to. So welcome. I've got Frederick, Nandi, Anna, and Rue. As I said to Frederick and Nandi, who were here a little bit before, both this is for Anna and for Rue. We're seeing that this is a small webinar. We're going to be able to do a dialogue. So if you wanted any point to ask questions, that would be great. Also, just to start, I would love to know a little bit more of what motivated you to come today and how you found out about the event. So if any of you would like to start with that would be great.
So I had visited Bogota, and I went to the National Museum, and I saw some a diorama of the Battle of Boyacá. And as an old soldier, that really interested me, the fact that British soldiers were fighting with the Colombians against the Spanish. And so this has now become a subject of particular interest to me.
Okay, great, super. And Nandi?
Hi, I'm 18 years old. I'm going to come to Kent University in September, and I'm studying linguistics, and I'm really interested in like sociolinguistics and learning about different cultures. So I thought that this would be interesting to just learn about like different cultures and stuff.
Great. I don't know if Anna or Rue would like to unmute and tell us a little bit more of what motivated them to join us today.
Hi, I can't turn on my camera, but I'm caring for my granny at the moment, so she's also in the room, so I can't turn on the camera. Sorry. But,
not a problem. I hear you well.
Okay, good. I was an applicant for Kent, but I actually chose a different university. But I'm going to do Hispanic studies, and it looked like a really interesting lecture. Sorry, that's a webinar. So
great. Happy to have you. And what about Rue? Are you there to tell us a little bit more why you wanted to join us?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm working in the University of Kent, and I'm teaching Mandarin Chinese languages. I think I received the link about this meeting through SECO's University of Kent, SECO's forum. Yeah. So I would like to learn a little bit of history about this topic. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Well, thanks everybody for joining in. And just a little bit of background. As I said before, my name is Professor Natalia Sobrevilla Perea. I'm originally from Peru, but I've been living in Britain for more than 20 years. And I've been researching and writing about the creation of nations in South America and in Latin America in general for over 20 years. So this is actually the area in which I specialize, the area in which I write, and I'm passionate about it. So the main thing that I wanted to share with you today are some of the ideas of how nations are created and how they become what they are today. Because until the beginning of the 19th century, these were all part of the Spanish monarchy. It was a huge expanse all over the Americas. As you know, the Spanish were the ones who conquered most of the American continent, some Caribbean islands, and from there they moved on to mainland Spanish America, what they became Spanish America. So they conquered what today is Mexico and Central America. The other big empire in the region was, of course, the Portuguese. The Luso monarchy was also very important, and they established a big colony in what today is Brazil. But the question that arises, and the reason for this webinar, is how is it that these two big imperial histories, the history of imperial Spain and the history of imperial Portugal, become all these different countries? And also the puzzle of why is it that Brazil remains as one big, large country in a sense similar to the United States, whereas the Spanish dominions all break up into many different republics. And that's pretty much one of the main questions that we want to see here. Now, just a little bit of context of the beginning of the 19th century, and I don't know how much of a historical background you might have. You might have different levels of historical understanding of the early 19th century, but a very important part of this, of course, is the revolutionary context, which comes actually at the very end of the 18th century. The ideas of equality and liberty that are starting to be discussed are very important, and initially are going to trigger what's known as the American Revolution, the independence of the United States of America in a war with Britain, which is going to be, they're going to declare their independence in 1776, so it's quite important at that juncture. And of course, these are moments of the expansion of capitalism, and one of the main issues that is going to be central to the American independence movement is the notion of no taxation without representation. So the idea that the colonists from the United States, the British colonists, feel that they need to have representation, and that's one of the first things that happens. Now, another very important thing that happens in this part of the later 18th century into the 19th century, of course, is the French Revolution. And the French Revolution is going to be extremely important in this context because in 1789, when the revolution is supposed to have started, there's going to be very big changes in the French realm, and there's going to be a huge impact also in the French dominion. So I spoke about the Spanish imperial presence in the Caribbean and in the Americas, the Portuguese presence, the British presence on North America, but also the French presence, not just in North America, but also in the Caribbean. And this is going to be one of the moments of juncture. As I said before, North America are going to become independent. They're going to start the process in 1776, but this is going to go onwards until the passing of the Constitution in 1887. And the passing of the Constitution is going to be very important, and it's going to have an agreement between the states that are going to be anti-slavery and the states where slavery is going to remain. So there is going to be an important issue there that is not going to be resolved in the American independence process, which is that of slavery. Now, when the French Revolution becomes more radicalized after 1889 into the 1890s, and the passing of the very radical Constitution of 1792, when the passing of that constitution is the abolition of slavery, the equality of men, and this is going to have a huge repercussion in the Caribbean island of Haiti and in Saint-Domingue, which is the French largest Caribbean island that produces sugar. And that's going to have huge consequences because eventually there's going to be a slave rebellion that is going to end up declaring the independence of Haiti. And this is going to be the first Black republic in the world. And this is going to be on the basis of anti-slavery, on the destruction of slavery. So these are going to be the two first things that are going to happen in the Americas. And they're very important for different reasons. Of course, because in the Portuguese and the Spanish dominions are quite similar in the sense that they're colonial settlers. There's the Spanish and Portuguese that have gone there and they have children there, and their children believe that they are not being treated fairly by their imperial organizations or the monarchies. So one way of becoming independent is what happens in North America, where there is the possibility of a republic where slavery still exists. And the other option is going to be what happens in Haiti, where those who are descendant from slaves or slaves themselves, some of them first generation arrivals from Africa, are going to become independent, and they are going to create a republic, a Black republic of former slaves. So those are the two things happening, and this happens in Haiti in 1804. Now, as we know, France in 1804 is going to have the importance of Napoleon, So Napoleon is going to be a towering figure in this moment, and he is also going to invade the Spanish peninsula. He claims that he wants to go to Portugal because Portugal is the biggest ally of Britain. So what Britain does is they send the Portuguese royal family on boats onto Rio, and they relocate the whole royal family of Portugal onto the Americas. And that is the biggest change, the biggest difference that there is between the Spanish model and the Portuguese model. What happens in Spain is completely different. The Spanish have allowed Napoleon, because they're technically in a detente and they're supposed to be friends, and they allow him to come with the idea that he's going to go to Portugal. But once he's in Spain, he takes over Spain, and he gets the king who also gives up his kingdom for his son. He abdicates in favor of his son, and he forces both kings to abdicate in the name of his brother Joseph Bonaparte. And this happens in 1808. And this triggers a huge crisis in the Spanish-American realm. And very, very different to what happens in Portugal, very different to what happened in North America, whereas the colonists themselves who were saying that they don't want to have this taxation without representation, that they want to have their own self-government. Very different to the reaction in Haiti, where it's slaves saying, we want to be free and we want to create a slave independent republic. What happens is, in the Portuguese speaking area of the Americas, what today is Brazil, the Portuguese royal family is there and centralizes the power. What happens with the Portuguese monarchy is that the king is no longer in Europe, but the king is in the Americas. And the king is going to have control over not just the American kingdom, but also the Portuguese lands and the African dominions of the Portuguese crown. So it's a very different thing. It's like the center has shifted. What happens in Spain is completely different, because here, the king has abdicated in the name of another, someone who's not part of the family. And this triggers a huge reaction of people saying there is no way we're going to accept this, because there is no legitimacy. There is no legitimacy for a ruler that has come because he's the brother of Napoleon. So they rebel in the name of the king. They say the absent king has been kidnapped. It's not that the king has died and therefore there could be a new king, but the king is absent. And in the absence of the king, the people of different communities in the Spanish monarchy decide that they have to organize themselves. And this begins in the Spanish peninsula, with the groups of people that are going to be fighting to expel the French invasion. In fact, they call this the War of Independence. They call it the War of Independence against the French, and they want to ensure that Napoleon and his troops are thrown out. And these are called juntas. And the juntas are basically organized around municipal governments. And they start springing up in 1808. Now, what happens in the rest of the Americas? Now, in Spanish America, so we'll forget about Portugal, the French, and the British. In Spanish America, the structure of government had been viceroyalties. There had been a very large viceroyalty in New Spain, in what today is Mexico, and there had been a very large viceroyalty in Peru, in what today is the whole of South America. But because this South American viceroyalty, this Peruvian viceroyalty, was so large, it was broken up during the 18th century. So in the 1730s, they create a smaller organization with a viceroyalty of New Granada, of the New Kingdom of Granada. And in 1776, so the same year that the North Americans are declaring independence, they create a new viceroyalty in the south, in the center in the city of Buenos Aires, known as the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata. So the South American area has been put into a lot of movement, and there's been a lot of shifting of power and balances of power. So what happens is, once the news arrives from Spain that these juntas have been set up in the name of the king, the reaction regionally varies dramatically. And in the two oldest viceroyalties, in New Spain and in Peru, the viceroys are very strong, and they have a very strong court. They have a very strong control of power, and they say, in the absence of the king, we, the viceroys, are going to be the ones in charge. But that is not what happens in all the regions. The first thing that happens is that these municipal organizations are going to start demanding some kind of autonomy. And this autonomy is going to be more in relation to other cities within their region than with Spain. So the first one that declares a junta is going to be in Montevideo in 1808. And they declare themselves staunchly in favor of the king. And they do that because, of course, there was also a smaller incident in 1806 and 1807, where there were British troops that tried to take over the control of Montevideo and Buenos Aires, and they failed. And these local elites are very decided that they need to control their own affairs. Now, the second areas that produce juntas are going to be the cities of Chuquisaca in what today is Bolivia, and the city of La Paz in what today is Bolivia, and the city of Quito in what today is Ecuador. And these are very interesting because these are the areas that are in between an old viceroyalty, Peru, and a new viceroyalty. In the case of what today is Bolivia, in La Paz and Chuquisaca, they don't want to depend either on Buenos Aires or in Lima. So in 1809, they declare for their own self-government in this junta. Whereas the same thing happens in Quito, in a region that is between the new viceroyalty of the new kingdom of Granada and the viceroyalty of Peru. And they again declare that they want to be in charge of their own affairs. So they take a leaf out of the book of what is happening in continental Spain. But the main thing that happens is that there is a thrust for municipalities, for municipal and provincial governments to declare that they need to self-govern. And one of the reasons for this is because the Spanish have organized politically around the city. And that is something that is quite different to the way in which other colonial powers established their control over the regions that they governed. So for instance, in the United States, it was easy for the states like Massachusetts or Connecticut or Pennsylvania to organize a union of states because there were state organizations. And in the end, they decided to create a federation. And in Brazil, which also is at this time mainly the regions facing the Atlantic, so it's only mainly port cities, so quite similar to the 13 colonies of the United States, they have, again, state-like organizations. Whereas in the Spanish realms, this is a much larger area that the Spanish control. They have these viceroyalties, but they also have these lower level municipal authorities that from 1809 are going to start to demand autonomy, not independence. And that's an important thing. They're going to demand autonomy. Now, the situation in the peninsula gets more complicated, and the way in which they try to deal, those who are fighting in the name of the king to defend the Spanish against the French, decide that they have to call for a Congress. They have to call for deputies to be elected. And they call for elections, not just in Spain, but also in the Americas. And they do that so they can pass a constitution in the name of the king to convert Spain into a constitutional monarchy. So in 1810, there's war happening in the peninsula. There's juntas being declared in certain regions of South America. And there are troops being organized in armies to ensure that those juntas are put down. And this is done by the viceroy in Peru. Now, the situation, as I say, gets even further complicated in 1810 when those defending the cause of the king in Spain are pretty much all thrown into the city of Cadiz, just supported by the British naval power there. So they kind of have a little enclave where they can still talk about a constitution, but they have no real control over peninsular Spain. And there is a lot of fear in many areas of the Spanish monarchy in the Americas, thinking, well, we do need to organize ourselves and become our own governments, autonomous governments. And they are going to start declaring juntas in 1810. So in 1810, there's going to be a whole number of juntas that are going to be established in Buenos Aires, in Caracas, in Bogota, in Santiago. And there's also going to be a very large uprising, a popular uprising in Mexico in September 1810, calling for changes in society. Now, all of these places are not going to call for outright independence at this point, with the exception of Venezuela. Venezuela, if your geography is good, it's at the north part of the southern part of South America, and it's facing the Caribbean. So in Venezuela, there's been a lot of immigration from those who were thrown out of Haiti. There's been a lot of movement in the Caribbean. There's large slave populations, and the people of Venezuela declare independence in 1811. And they declare independence and they create a first republic because they want to emulate the North American example that will allow them to be independent and retain slavery. What they want to do is to prevent a slave uprising like the one seen in Haiti. They want to prevent the situation getting out of their hands. And they think that the best way to do it is by creating a republic. So they take the whole area, the whole provincial area of what had been a captaincy general, so an organization within the viceroyalty of the New Kingdom of Granada, and declare independence. Next door in the New Kingdom of Granada, you have juntas nearly for every municipality. Every city and every province declares their own autonomy from each other. And it becomes a very complicated process. And there are also some cities that declare that they remain loyal to the King of Spain and they do not want to be autonomous. So there's a lot going on. In the south, in the area of what today is Argentina, but back then was the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, you have Buenos Aires as the main city organizing an army to take control over all the area that had been given to them as the viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, including what today is Bolivia. And this is where actual conflict is going to start. There's going to be a war between the viceroy in Peru and the junta of Buenos Aires, and they're going to clash in the area of Lake Titicaca, and there's going to be a great battle there, the Battle of Huaqui in 1811. Whereas in Venezuela, that has declared independence, the provinces that are remaining close to the king are also in conflict with those who've declared independence. So what we see in South America at this point is something very different to what we've seen in other places that declared independence. Very different from North America, where you had the colonists that had to fight an army sent from Britain. Of course, there were similarities in the sense that there were some Americans that were in favor of retaining their relationship with the king. And in fact, those who were who did that ended up moving to Canada. So there was a possibility for those who were loyal to the king. It was also very different to what happened in Haiti, where in this small island, the slaves overpowered everybody else and managed to create their own independent republic. What happened in South America is you had a huge conflict between certain parts and certain regions supporting the king and others that didn't. And there were some fault lines. And these fault lines had, had very long trajectories that had been geographic areas that had been geographically different, that had cultures that were slightly, there was also quite a bit of distance. But the main thing is that there was this confrontation between those defending the king and those who wanted to have more autonomy. Because with the exception of Venezuela, everybody else at this moment was just talking about autonomy. On the other hand, as I mentioned, in the city of Cadiz, in that enclave, there's a passing of a constitution, and in some areas of Hispanic America, that constitution is brought back and put into practice. And this is going to be in areas of New Spain, in Guatemala, in what today is Ecuador, in Peru, in Bolivia. And this constitution is going to be seen as a possibility of having a liberal relationship with the crown. Now, when the Napoleon is finally defeated, as you know, and the King of Spain returns, and when he sees this constitution that has been put in place for his when he's not there, he abolishes the constitution and decides that he has to take control over the region once again. And he sends a lot of these veterans, a lot of these troops that are veterans from the wars against Napoleon to South America to ensure that there's control. And the first area that they come is precisely to what used to be Venezuela, and they control over that. And there's a very intense war known as the War of Reconquest. And then also, this becomes a signal to those in the further south part in what today is Argentina, that they do not want to be a subject of having to return to the control of Spain. And that's why in July of 1816, they declare the independence of the United Provinces of South America. And they have this idea that they are going to be able to create a new nation. So war is going to be a huge feature between 1810 into 1816, but that is the time where the king is still absent. From 1816, there's going to be a much more aggressive move for independence, and there's going to be a huge series of campaigns, and they're going to organize very large and important armies that are going to control very large swathes of land. And these are going to be very important military campaigns in South America. There's going to be two great leaders that put together two great armies. One of them in the north is Simón Bolívar, and one of them in the south is José de San Martín. And they are going to take control for the independence through a military campaign. So that's what's going to happen from 1817 onwards. It's going to be an actual military campaign. And Frederick mentioned that he'd been surprised by the presence of Britons. There's a book that I would recommend by Matthew Brown called Adventuring in the Spanish Republics, which is all about the men from Britain who went to these wars. And they were very important. They were also veterans from the wars against Napoleon in some cases, and in others, they had been drafted from Ireland or from poor sections in England to come and contribute to the independence of South America. So these are going to be huge military campaigns that are going to see the crossing of the Andes, both of Bolívar and of San Martín, the taking over of Chile, the establishment of a huge naval force in Chile, again supported by British naval officers. Lord Thomas Cochrane is going to be the man in charge of the naval campaign against Peru in 1819 and 1820, and then he is going to be quite important there. So the British participation is something that we really should take into consideration. Now, what happens in the northern part of Latin America, Mexico, and Central America is, as I said, there had been this uprising that had a lot of popular support and had been very important in creating this internal war within New Spain. And this went on for a very long time. Now, the other moment that is very important is in 1820, there's going to be the passing of a new, there's going to be a new liberal government in Spain, and they are going to reinstate the 1812 Constitution in 1820. And by this moment, the wars of independence have already succeeded in making what today is Argentina independent, what today is Chile independent, what today is Venezuela independent, what today is Colombia independent, and they create a new republic by uniting Venezuela and Colombia into a new entity known as Colombia. So these are very distant from each other. There's no connections. There's no way into easily to go with one ship to from one place to another. So they remain very, very separate. And the only places that remain by 1820 under the control of the Spanish are the areas that have been the longest central parts of the empire: New Spain and Peru. And that's going to have the solution to those conflicts is going to be very different. And what today is Mexico, when they hear that the Constitution has been reinstated in 1820, they decide in 1821 that they want to go separate ways, and they declare the creation of an empire in Mexico and Central America. They reached an agreement with those that had risen against the king, and they say, we will be an independent empire. We want to have a member of the Spanish royal family be our king or emperor, and if they don't want to, another prince from European origin. But eventually they don't want to either, so they have to settle for a local militia officer that has been one of the generals that is important in this campaign, and that's going to be Emperor Agustín de Iturbide, and that's going to be the independence of Mexico in 1821. At this point, the only place that remains under the Spanish control is going to be Peru. And in Peru, their last battles of independence are going to be fought by huge armies in Napoleon-style campaigns, first led by José San Martín with his naval convoy that goes from Chile into Peru, and then eventually when he is not able to succeed against the royalists, because there's a very large loyalist force in Peru, the armies of Simón Bolívar come down from Colombia and contribute to this campaign. So the way in which these independence processes happen is through war. And that's something that is similar to what we've seen in other regions. But in contrast to, say, North America, where there was a possibility for those who wanted to still be loyal to the king to move into Canada, there is no space in Spanish America for those that remain loyal to the king, because everybody else in the continent believes that they have to move in and contribute to their independence. The only places that remain loyal at this point are the islands, the island of Cuba and the island of Puerto Rico, and they are going to be remaining as part of the Spanish monarchy all the way until the end of the 19th century, when there's the Spanish-American War. Now back to Brazil. What happened in Brazil is also very important. In 1820, the king is still in Brazil, and the Portuguese Congress or Cortes, so the representatives in Portugal, demand that the king returns to Portugal. And the king sees himself forced to return because he sees that otherwise he's going to lose his crown. So he returns to Portugal and leaves his son in charge of Brazil. And eventually, also in 1821, in the 7th of September, the son of the king, so the crown prince, declares the independence of Brazil and creates a Brazilian empire. But this is something that allows Brazil to remain as a unit. But also, as I did mention, geographically, Brazil is much more compact than the whole lot of the rest of South America. Now, just to finish, I would like to share this content with you. This is a map that I put together with some of my colleagues. And here you see a very colorful map of South America. Please let me know that you can see that instead of me right now. Thanks, Frederick. So here, I will put in the chat the link to this. Here we have a map, and we have, these are the main men who participated in the wars of independence, some of the cities. And what you can do is you can explore this by looking at one of these, and they go into a video that will tell you a little bit of the story of one of these icons. So we have some paintings, we have stories about people, and and this is, I think, a great way for you to explore a little bit more of the details of what I have been talking about today. So I am going to actually just put this in the chat right now, so you can access this map and you can look at it at leisure, and you can have a bit more of an exploration of all these different stories that come out from the wars of independence. Now, I've been talking for a very long time, and I don't know if you have any questions or any comments that you'd like to make. So I'm going to mute myself for a minute and let you go ahead and ask me some questions. So do we have any questions, any queries, anything that you'd like to know more about?
No, I've enjoyed it very much, and I'd like to know more about all of it. Yeah, I've just been watching I think it's filmed in Spain, a TV series on Netflix about Simon Bolivar, which was in Spanish but with English subtitles, so that made it much easier for me.
Yes, no, that's a great series, and it was shot in Colombia, and it's a kind of a long durée. It gives you a lot of details of what happened, so it's a very good way of learning more about the specifics. So that's great.
I visited the house where he died. That was pretty interesting as well.
So that was in Cartagena, in Colombia.
Yeah, Santa Marta, I think. But yes,
Santa Marta,
I've been to Cartagena as well, which is fantastic. And I heard the story about when the British last attacked and failed. It was pretty good.
Great, excellent. Excellent. What about you, Nandi? Any questions?
I don't have any questions. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Good, good. And yeah, so as I said, the website that I sent you, there is got this map, and they can explore it and have a little bit more of an idea of some of the specifics. I mean, I've given you a grand view, an overview of the main things that happened in what was a very long and complex process. So I hope that this has been of interest, and that you continue with your interest in this. I teach a module at the University of Kent when we talk about not just the wars of independence, but the process of creating nations after independence. So we explore some of these topics and a bit more about how each of these countries comes to be a unit and a different one, because one of the main questions is always, why is it that these nations that share so much, they have the same language, they have the same religion, why is it that they ended up splintering into so many different new republics? So in a sense, it had to do with the way in which independence happened. It had to do with the desire of the elites to maintain control, to prevent the indigenous and the African descendant peoples the opportunity to take advantage of the situation, even though they do participate in the wars, because they're mostly the soldiers that participate. It's interesting how the elites, descendants of the Spaniards, are able to use the language of liberation, use the language of liberty to create this idea that they need to be free. They need to be free from Spain, but it actually was something that was triggered externally by the Napoleonic invasion, and there was this chain reaction that kind of came up, and was what really triggered the campaigns. But also that there could have been alternatives, different ways of resolving the issues, but they were not taken up. So eventually, this is the history that we have. So great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll say bye now. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. There's some more details on that website that I shared. So please feel free to have a look and pass along and get in touch if you have any questions or queries or just curiosity on anything. All right?
Yes, thank you. And I shall look out for the book.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.